All right. In chapter 6, we're going to talk about revenue recognition. And this is one of the more critical areas of accounting. And it's something that FASB changed about, 4, 5, maybe 6 years ago now. And the reason that they changed the way we do revenue recognition is because business has gotten a little more complex through the years. And to give you an example of that, what has happened is that there are a lot more instances where sales are bundles of things. And probably the simplest example of that is you may have or have had in the past, a cell phone plan where you paid a discounted rate for the actual device, the phone, but then you were locked into a contract for a period of time, a year, 2 years, whatever it might be, in order to get that discount rate. And if you ended your contract before the 2-year period, then you would have to pay some type of a fee. That's a bundled service. So you're getting the service of the cell phone carrier and you're getting the device, a bundled service. And of course, we see that in a number of things. And so the issue becomes, how much revenue do I give to each one, and when do I recognize it? Because, and as it turns out, I will recognize the revenue on the device all at the time of the sale. When you hand the customer the device, that becomes the revenue recognition point for the phone, but the service is recognized over a period of time. And so the question then becomes, how much do you assign, how much of the money that's coming in do you assign to each of those things? And we will have to use the time value of money in order to discount that phone. Another example is you might see promotions that say if you pay it off within 24 months, there's no interest. And that may be true in a marketing sense, but in a accounting sense, we know that that's not really true. That what's actually happening is they're earning a lesser amount from the sale of the goods, and then they're earning a certain amount from the interest for financing it over a period of time. And then that's going to be individual depending upon the discount rate that the business can borrow money at. And so this has made the world a little bit more complex, and that's why we have these revenue recognition issues. I think probably the best way to teach this is to actually use the prior way of doing it, and then show you the additions to it before that we've done since, that we added 4 or 5 years ago. So in order for us to, under the old rules, in order for us to recognize revenue, there must be 3 things that occur. Okay, the first is that either the good has been delivered or the service has actually been performed. And so it might be an attorney drawing up a will. The will is actually drawn up and it's done, or it might be a sale of a good. You buy it on Amazon and it's delivered to your post office box. And so the good has been delivered or the service has been performed. That's the first thing that has to happen. The second thing that has to happen is there has to be a transfer of the title. And so now when that good is delivered or the service is rendered, it might be subject to customer approval. And so we're going to recognize the revenue when the title is transferred. And what that means from a legal sense, the title has transferred, is that now the seller of the service or the good has an enforceable right to collect the price for that. The third thing that has to happen is there has to be an agreed upon price. And so we know how much that it's going to transfer for and how much is owed. Now, that does not mean that money actually transfers at that moment, right? It's okay to owe you and still recognize the revenue. That's the whole point of accrual accounting, is once I have an enforceable right, I can recognize the revenue on this. And then there's really kind of a fourth thing that goes on, is kind of in the background, is I have to have a reasonable expectation that the price will actually be achieved, that the seller will, or the buyer will actually pay for it. Now, there are some instances you can come up with some examples where we charge a price knowing that we're not going to get the full amount. Matter of fact, it's very common in the legal industry that lawyers will just say $100, and in fact they really only collect about $60 or $65 for every $100 that they bill. There's a number of reasons we do things that way. Hospitals are notorious for that. They'll charge a cash patient for so much money, but then if they're willing to pay cash right then as they leave the hospital, they'll give them a significant discount for paying up front. And there's all sorts of reasons why companies will do that, charge one price knowing that they won't get the full amount. And so, but that's the old style of revenue recognition. So about 4, 5, 6 years ago, FASB introduced this concept of what we call performance obligations. And performance obligations are when we debundle all of those different items. And so let's take the example, cable TV is a good example of that. It's something that is a pure service, right? So you could get from cable TV your television programming, you could get your internet service, and you could get a home phone, and possibly even a home security system, all lined up through your cable provider. So those are 3, 4 services that you could possibly achieve. Each one of those services is considered a performance obligation. Okay, so it might be that the television by itself would sell for $60, the internet by itself would sell for $40, and the phone by itself would sell for $25. That would add up to $125. But if you choose the bundle, you only have to pay $95. So it's a lesser amount than each one separately. And that's the marketing gimmick to get you to buy more, right? And you know, it's a legitimate thing. And so in order, how do we give a value to each one of those? And so in this case, where we have 3 known prices, we will prorate it. So what we will do is, for the cable, we will take 60 divided by 125, so the amount separate for the cable, divided by the total amount for each one separately, so that gives us 60 by 125, and then we multiply that by the $95. We just simply prorate it. To give the amount to assign to the cable TV, we would take the 40 divided by 125 and multiply it by the $95. And then the phone would be the 25 divided by 125 times the $95. And we would get a separate price for each of those. There are, however, occasions where we don't have separate pricing ability, or we might have separate pricing for one. If we have separate pricing for one, but we don't have separate pricing for another, for example, I can buy a computer, and I can buy it as a standalone, take it out the door, good luck, you're on your own, or I can buy it with a service plan. And so if we have the known price, so the computer on a standalone price, then I assign that price to the computer, and then the service plan gets whatever is remaining. So that those would be two separate performance obligations. The important thing, if we take the example of the cell phone, which I already gave you, the important thing to realize is that a performance obligation for a good is generally satisfied when it's delivered and we recognize all the revenue. A performance obligation for a service is generally recognized over a period of time as the service is rendered. Now, you can have contracts, and yet those can be voidable contracts. For example, let's say you go and rent an apartment. The landlord agrees to provide you a place to live, and you agree to pay your rent on the first of every month. And oftentimes you will have a first and a last month's rent. Now, in financial accounting, we will recognize the first month's rent as revenue, but the last month's rent is a deferred revenue. So it's actually a liability. Can you construct a case where there will never be a last month rent? Yes, you can. It's not something that happens very often, and that's why we use the deferred revenue model. But let's suppose that you rent an apartment, you live in it for 2 or 3 months, and fortunately you're out of town and a tornado comes through and blows away your apartment. It's pretty obvious that you don't owe the landlord rent for an apartment that's no longer there, right? And so the landlord would be required to refund your last month's rent because he was unable to produce the performance obligation of providing you a place to live for that said rent. And so understanding when revenue is recognized is very important. This is where we also get into terms such as FOB, which stands for free on board, and FOB can be shipping point or destination. Free on board just means that we will load it on the truck. FOB shipping point means that the title transfers at the point that it's loaded on the truck to be shipped to the customer. The customer is now responsible for insuring the good once it's loaded on the truck. You can also have FOB destination. That generally happens when the company owns its own delivery service, and so they put it on their own trucks and they will deliver it to your business's door. And then title transfers when it's put on your doorstep or your loading dock. That is FOB destination. If you get into international operations, this comes under maritime law, and lots of times it will title will actually transfer at the 50% point of the destination. And so if you're shipping it, let's say you're importing goods from China and you're going to offload it at the port of Los Angeles, somewhere in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, the title will actually transfer. And this is important for revenue recognition purposes. One of my favorite examples of playing games, if you will, kind of fraudulently recognizing revenue, is actually one of my favorite companies is Ray-Ban. I like the old time aviator sunglasses and used to wear them a lot. I haven't worn a pair lately, but used to wear the Ray-Ban aviators a lot. But what they were doing, they actually got in a little bit of trouble. They got in trouble a couple of times for things. But one of the things they did is what's called channel stuffing. And in channel stuffing, what you do is you ship out goods to the buyer, but you don't. It's not a firm contract. It's like, oh, if you don't sell these, just return them. We'll give you your money back. So it's not a firm It's not a firm deal. And companies do this in order to boost their revenue, right? And so they'll stuff the channel so that the CEO, the CFO makes their performance bonuses at the end of the year, but they're kind of soft contracts. Sometimes they're under the table contracts. If you read the contract, it looks okay, but it's done with a nod, wink, wink. And so that's known as channel stuffing. It's really what we would call a contingent sales. Some of you ladies may be familiar with consignment shops. You buy a fancy dress, a fancy purse, you use it for 1 or 2 outings, and then you don't want it anymore because it's already been seen. So you take it to a consignment shop, and hopefully you'll get 50% of your money. Somebody will come along and buy it, and they'll get to use it as a new dress or a new purse, and that's not done so much in the men's world, somewhat, but much more in women's fashion. And that's known as a consignment sale. So the consignment shop has the good, but they're not going to recognize they're not going to recognize that it's a sale, that they don't take possession of the good. If they don't sell it in a month or 2, you can walk in and get your dress or your purse back, and it's no big deal. You don't owe them money for taking it back. That's a consignment shop, and you have a lot of that. A lot of that happens in like the grocery store. So you go by in a grocery store, they might have things like magazine stand, or they might have a display with women's hosiery, or a number of things like that. And those are consignment sales. And so the company, the company that puts up the women's hosiery, the company that puts up the magazine, doesn't record it as a sale when they deliver it to the store. They record it as a sale when the store actually sells it and collects the cash or the credit card receipt from the customer, the ultimate customer. And those are known as consignment sales. And that's done quite a bit in business, and the reason for that is that the initial store doesn't want to take on the inventory and the cost of inventory, so the inventory stays with the consignment company in order to do that. So anyway, the other one that Ray-Ban did, I told you they got in trouble a couple of times. They actually got in trouble for money laundering back in the day when cocaine was the big drug of choice. This is back in the 80s and the 90s. And what they were doing, the Colombian drug lords would fly up loads of cocaine to Miami, and they would collect cash for that. And then you always have the problem of how do you legitimize cash, that is gotten illegally. And what they were doing, what the Colombians were doing, was they would pay cash to Ray-Ban for just cases and cases of sunglasses, and then go sell the sunglasses down in South and Central America. And now they've got legitimate revenues, and it was an easy way to launder the money and make it look like legitimate revenues. They got their hand slapped by that. There's a bank that helped them do it, HSBC, Hong Kong Shanghai Banking Corporation, that has gotten their hand slapped a number of times for helping companies do money laundering like that. There also was another one, BCCI, Bank of something Commerce International, but it was widely known around circles as the Banks of Crooks and Criminals International. It's out of business. HSBC is still in business, still operating, just not in the United States. They've gotten their hands slapped enough in the United States that they don't operate in the U.S. anymore. So anyway, that's that's the introduction to revenue recognition. And again, I will be going through some problems over the next few days, and I will post those. And I think we'll be able to, you'll be able to get a better sense of how that actually works. So until then, good luck, and we will see you on the next video.